this weekend at middleweight. If this fight goes to a decision, I'll dye my hair blue for next weekend's videos. Will you do the same?
I'll go platinum blonde. I'll do like the Charles Oliveira.
All right, because if you combine the records of both of these men, Jordan Wright is 12-3 with a no contest. Dusko Todorovic is 11-3. You combine them, 2 decision wins between both of them, but really they're both 2 fights just in general that have gone to decision. They're both for Dusko Todorovic. It's absolutely wild.
Do you think before this fight, Jordan Wright's going to be crying in his locker room just going, let me bang, bro?
I mean, the guy likes to first round bang. That's the craziest part about it. For Jordan Wright, he's never seen the third round in all, 16 of his fights, and he's only ever seen the second round twice. And so that's kind of wild. Dana White's Contender Series and in the UFC, Wright is 2-3 with a no contest, but the no contest for Anthony Fluffy Hernandez was due to the jazz cabbage. He was floating that green stuff.
And I don't care. I got to be honest about that.
No. So that was the lot. He lost by finishing.
Wait, do America, that's what I don't get. Do people in other parts of the world care about this way more than we do?
I think some Southeast Asian countries definitely
That's
care.
fair. Again, this is something that doesn't come up in MMA all that often, but drug tests or failed drug tests do happen. As a Canadian, you guys probably know this. I don't care if you fail for weed at all. It doesn't help anybody become better at MMA fights. I never think about that, though, because I'm sure there's people out there who are like, oh my goodness, that's like a terrible PED.
Yeah, it is. And in lots of places in the world, it is. Canada's just very relaxed on those things. But when we bring it back into this fight, both these guys are finishers to the nth degree. And for Jordan Wright, you see it in his style. He does have a karate background. And he's a guy that right after high school, fresh out, went to Jackson Wink, tried out to be in the pro program, ended up at Jackson Wink for a really long time training with, and I'll throw the picture up there, like a babyface John Jones. And it's a great way to get ready to get yourself to the UFC. Since switched over to Dynamics MMA in California with Anthony Hardonk and Vladimir Matyushenko. The successes of those two guys haven't boiled down into Jordan Wright, but the wildness is definitely there. And for Wright, his last time out against Marc-Andre Barriault, I don't know why he tried to flip the scales on him, because he went for a takedown, wouldn't give it up, got his head kind of locked into the side position. Barriault cranks on the guillotine, then reverses it, gets on top, and it's a mounted guillotine win for Barriault. But really played into the hands of the Canadian, where Jordan Wright, if he's going to win, he has a lot of success when he stands and bangs. It's also like an Achilles heel, but that is where he finds most of his success, and that's what makes this fight so much fun, because for Dusko, we know how good of a ground fighter he is as well, but sometimes he doesn't like to employ his wrestling, and he likes to bang.
Exactly. There's a version of Dusko out there who fights like Chad Mendes. Now, of course, he doesn't have the wrestling background of a guy like Mendes, but you get the idea. He's going to box his way into his wrestling exchanges, then he's going to use both parts of those games to help complement the other. But we really have just seen the swing and bang version of Dusko throughout a lot of his UFC tenure up until this point, and it has been good, don't get me wrong, but the problem is, when you fight like Justin Gaethje, you better be able to take a punch like Justin Gaethje. That's pretty much the rule for being a brawler. And for Dusko, he has been wobbled in pretty much every single one of his UFC fights up until this point, and that does make it pretty nervous when he's fighting basically anybody in the middleweight division, and especially somebody who has the heavy hands of Jordan Wright. But this is another one of those fights. I mentioned it earlier with Mana Martinez, Brandon Davis. The winner of this isn't then going to go on to fight for a title, but this fight's going to be awesome for as long as it lasts. I really think it will be. If Dusko goes out there, rushes for it with combinations, and just meets the power punching of Jordan Wright, this is going to be an awesome fight.
Jordan Wright has the requisite 5 fights under his UFC belt to be included in the all-time UFC statistical rankings, and I'm going to throw it up there on the screen. He is ranked in the top 5 category for the amount of strikes that the guy throws, but also how quick his fights end. They are over very, very quickly.
And those aren't always in a positive light, you know?
No. And again, he has a well-rounded background, does Jordan Wright. For Dusko, black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and a black belt in Taekwondo. So he's kind of like Anthony Pettis and Benson Henderson, only he doesn't really fight like Anthony Pettis or Benson Henderson. His best win for the fighter out of Serbia is his win over Michel Pereira, where he backs him up against the cage and unloads and wins the Serbian Battle Championship middleweight title. Comes into the UFC, well, even before that, had a brief fight against Teddy Ash on Contender Series. Wins there, picks up a performance bonus over Daquan Townsend, where he ends up getting him down to the mat on top and mounts him and finishes him with ground and pound. But since then, Murky waters for Todorovic. Lose to Puna Soriano, gets
one.
finished. Lose to Gregory Rodriguez by decision. Beats Maki Pitolo by finish, who's picked up a couple of wins outside of the octagon. And lose to Chidi and Jokoani with one of the most hellacious elbows you're ever going to see. So for both of these guys, big time bangers. We have a look at the odds. Dusko open a minus 155. He's a minus 202. Jordan Wright open a plus 135, plus 166. I see this one closer to even.
I was just about to say, I've never said I love the odds on Jordan Wright before, but like, those aren't that bad.
Oh, people are going to tee you in the comments section on the plane listening to the podcast. We'll have a look at the Tapology vote. I'm not going to leave it up to surprise. 1,345 total votes, 74% Todorovic. You've got 79% by knockout for the 26% that I've right, 77% by knockout. Either guy could get the knockout. It's a fight that I would anticipate finishes, and I bet the odds, like, you wouldn't even touch them anyway.
Two guys who on either day can look really good and on either day look really bad. The difference is Dusko can look really good fight to fight or really bad fight to fight. Jordan Wright can look really good or really bad minute to minute. And that's what really does concern me in a matchup like this against Dusko. Let's say Dusko does use his wrestling to at least close the distance and just get closer to Jordan Wright. I think that could be a great way to actually open up with some of his combinations, just as a way so that Wright can effectively counter him on the way in. Threaten with your wrestling a little bit, go in for the hips, use your combinations to go back up top. I think the body shots for Dusko are going to be really key in this fight as well, because Jordan Wright is someone who stands very upright. That body should be wide open for Dusko if he does decide to go to the body with some of those hooks. Again, not something Dusko always does, but when he does go to the body with his combinations, they're always very effective. Again, this fight is as one or the other as you can possibly get. It is water and oil. There's not much of a mix at all. I kind of like the odds for Jordan Wright, if I'm being completely honest, because I like the size. I like the range that he does have in this weight class, but like I just said, I sort of talked myself into the Dusko pick. I think if Todorovic can get on the inside, I don't know if Wright has an answer in that, like, elbow range, and I think that's where Dusko's going to get a lot of his own work done at. So again, this is a fight where either I get knocked out in the first minute of it or the last minute of it, but I'm ever so slightly picking Dusko.
I've seen more out of Dusko. I've seen more fights. Well, I've seen two go to decision. I've seen more third rounds, but I do favor his style. I mean, again, his fight against Teddy Ash is the third round a lot of fun. Not really. He kind of holds Teddy Ash up against the cage, and that's pretty much that. But for Dusko, I've seen the wrestling chops. Now, for Jordan Wright, he did get a couple of takedowns against Marc-Andre Barrio at the start of that fight, and you like to see that turn of the corner. Maybe I'm not going to be as much stand and bang. Maybe I'm going to mix my martial arts. I think that plays more into his opponent's game plan in this matchup. If Wright decides to put the wrestling shoes on, Dusko does have some counters to that as well. So for me, I'll go with the fighter out of Serbia. We're in agreement on that one, but do like the odds for the underdog in this matchup. And usually on these cards, I go with a couple of wacky underdogs, and this one really isn't one of them, but both of us siding with Dusko in the matchup. Let us know down below in the comments section. Will you also dye your hair if this one goes to a decision? It would be absolutely wild
if I tweet at Charles Oliveira with my hair as long as it is, like bright blonde, I better get a retweet or something.
We'll see what happens. Coming up this weekend, some big time fights on this card. Grasso, Araujo in the main event. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say,
let's get into it.